What is going on, everyone? AP over here at Rump Here Sports, bringing to you once again. We got the Hardwood show. We're here on a Saturday. Mangone. We're going to have these shows each and every Saturday moving forward. It's not always going to be us, though. Bobby Hare is going to be doing this a lot, Glock, etc. And we're going to rotate people in. But Mangone, how's your Saturday going? What's going on, my man?
Yeah, crazy Saturday, right? Because we got typically Rubio was supposed to be on for today, but had to move the schedule around because I believe they're going to be doing a NASCAR up to lock show. Don't hold me to it, but check that out on the premium side. I think they're going to be trying to do that. If not, hey, maybe it's just because Rubio needs time to get some other stuff done because NASCAR moved their race out of nowhere, like with 4 hours notice, basically. So we got that all straightened out, but we got NBA to take care of with you guys. So we're going to do the show. We're going to update all that content. And then, of course, again, we're going to have NASCAR content too. So if you haven't signed up at Run Pure Sports and you want to get on some of this overlay, it's a great opportunity to. So I'll be certainly in those streets. Hopefully you guys will be joining me as well. But I'm excited to break down NBA. Also, it's the leaderboard week, right? We got to close strong. We got 2 more nights left, I think, for the leaderboard. And, I've had an okay week. I'm in the cash line for all the leaderboard stuff, barely. Maybe I'm on the bubble or in, and we close with 2 strong weekend days. I think I'll get a nice little cash.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't even know where I'm at, but I've been playing it each and every slate, so hopefully somewhere up there. And Raul, if you're watching, I'm getting you tonight, my man. He beat me by 0.25. and a $2,500 qualifier yesterday. Really nice build from our guy, Raul, little RPS member. Today, we're going to switch it up. So initially, it was Rubio and I, and, Rubio and I, we do the Sabersim show for NFL. We wanted to dedicate this show today to highlighting Sabersim, going through our processes. That is what we are going to do. So I'm going to bring Sabersim up while we're sitting right here. So if you're new, and if you haven't used Sabersim, I have all of my stuff plugged in there already as far as like buying and selling on certain players. So we're all good to go. Trying to see if we can, So it's kind of nice. I have this set up. My main is slightly different than the show version just because it's like, I don't want people, I'm going to bring up builds. We're going to bring up all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I don't want it to be exactly like what I'm running. So it's got to be a little bit different. But this is what we're going to work on today. We're going to go game by game. We're going to talk about the players, buying and selling on each. I've adjusted the projections. We've ran the builds. We're going to show you contest sims and everything else. If you have questions while we're doing this, throw them in chat. We'll do our best to get to them. Some of the more technical stuff, Rubio's typically a little bit better at getting those answered, but we are going to do our best. So, Mangone, 5-game slate tonight. I'm going to highlight. So I have, and I like this about Saber. I like this feature. You can see all the games that are relevant for this slate. We're going to first talk about the Warriors and the Hawks. That's the game that we got pulled up right now. Injury news with this. Sadiq Bey is out already. DeAndre Hunter, questionable. DeAndre Hunter's been on a minutes limit anyway, so not really relevant for the slate. DeJounte Murray, though, big news. He is questionable as well. Then on the Warriors side, Gary Payton, Moses Moody, Dario Saric, all out. Warriors have been running a really tight rotation. Give me your overall thoughts on this on this game, Mangone. Then I'll go through kind of where I'm at from a projection standpoint, buying and selling on each player.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great game, obviously. Pretty much any time the Atlanta Hawks are on a slate, right? There's a couple teams, or maybe like five to 7 teams in the league that are always like, are this team on the slate? Yes or no? And if they are, we need to obviously consider targeting them, right? And that's the Atlanta Hawks. They are one of those teams that we have on that list, at least for me. So as I go through it, I mean, Steph Curry at 9-1, like for the upside he has, I just think that price tag's too cheap. If you're someone that likes to look at ceilings, and also, I think if you look at all the ceilings that you could see on this game, it's just too hard to argue with someone like Steph Curry at 9.1K. Yeah, sure. He could maybe miss some shots and struggle at times, but he is a volatile player, right? The range of outcomes on Steph Curry are just wide. So I like Steph Curry here as a contrarian spend-up option. At least I think he's contrarian, right? It's a 5-game slate. So The line from contrarian to really high owned is definitely a little bit different. Jonathan Kuminga is definitely a guy that I've been on a lot lately. Kuminga's been awesome. He has just been like, I mean, I know he came at Steve Kerr and said like he was mad and wanted to start playing more. Dude, there's been injuries and you're playing, and he's been phenomenal. I mean, he's 6'7". I think on FanDuel he's 7'5". He's gotten a huge price increase over there. I mean, I just think Kuminga is still way too cheap. When you think of Draymond Green and games he thrives in, this is one of those games, right? The Atlanta Hawks, sloppy basketball, up and down. Like, it's a great game environment for someone like Draymond Green, and they're going to need his size against the guys opposite on the Atlanta Hawks side of the ball because they play bigger. So I think Draymond's a great play too. I kind of have it listed in that order, but I like Kuminga and Draymond more than Curry, right? I just think their value is really good. And then I have Klay Thompson as the next guy. I think Podziemski might be a better play just because he's an elite fantasy producer, and I'm not super excited to play Klay. I prefer Kuminga and Draymond to him. So yeah, I think that's my overall takes on the Golden State side. The Atlanta side,
Mangone, real quick. Let me give you my rundown real quick on the Warriors side. Then we'll go to Atlanta. Cool. So I'm a buyer on Curry. I agree with everything that you said. And when you look at, so this is kind of how I use Saber, and I cross-reference it with, like, say, the heat map, for example. One thing that you always talk about is, positions matter. And Steph Curry, like, at first glance, I mean, when you look at the rotation, Kerr's running a much tighter rotation right now. We have yet to see that reflected through like a ceiling performance from a guy like Chef. We all know what he's capable of doing. It's kind of been an up and down, more so down year, but that performance is coming, and I want to be in before the field. So I am at this price a buyer on Curry. And when you look at the other options on the slate, we got Jalen Brunson, we got Luka. At point guard, Brunson, with how tight Thibs is running the rotation, he's going to get a lot of run, and he's going to get some ownership. And then Luka is the guy at the point guard spot that really has to get a lot of ownership as well. And then we got the Bulls situation that we're going to talk about with Ayo and potentially Alex Caruso. So I think people are going to overlook Stephen Curry, and I show him as being pretty low owned, making him a nice tournament play. And so in large field stuff, I'm a buyer on him. And honestly, like, I'm considering going even, more of an aggressive bump. We are really close to Saber right there. You can see 47, basically in and a half. And I'm, almost 2 points or a point and a half. And I think you could argue go 2 points above that. And there are some things that we can do to adjust this as well, kind of in that step 3. Well, it used to be step 3 with Saber, but once we run everything, we rerun the content sims, we have our pool of 5,000 builds, we can continue to make adjustments, and we're going to show you all of that. So I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer on Chef. I'm definitely a buyer on Kuminga, buyer on Draymond. Klay's the interesting one. So for me, I'm really in between where we're at. Saber's very aggressive on Klay. Now, if you run this, and I did a test build beforehand, When I had Klay kind of in this range of 32 or 33, like if I was a buyer, I was getting like 90% of Klay. And that just tells me at that price, the positional flexibility, it's kind of forcing him in to multiple different positions. And Klay is raw scoring dependent, not a peripheral stat type of guy. And so I would rather be kind of in the middle or maybe a slight seller on him. I like him, but I'm just understanding the risks that associated with it. Podziemski, I like. I'm a slight buyer on him as well. I mean, the Warriors are running a pretty tight 7-man rotation right now, and Andrew Wiggins is just. I mean, he's fine defensively, and he's just. It's been an up and down season for him too. So, like, the guys I feel most confident with, I think I'm fully aligned with you. It's Kuminga. That big performance from Chef is coming. I want to be early on that, so I'm a buyer. But this is kind of where I'm at as far as the Warriors go.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement there with a lot of what you said. And I will admit, the take that you said on the Klay Thompson stuff, he does just pop in a lot, right? And I understand that. And it's a 5-game slate, but I think he's going to be pretty high owned too. So he might be someone I end up fading. We'll see. But he's definitely going to be someone I got to think on for sure because the price is too cheap. It's definitely a fair point. When it comes to the rest of these Hawks, for one, Trae Young looked great the other day, right? Pretty good matchup, too, again. This is definitely a good game environment for someone like Trae Young. I don't mind him as a spend at 9.5K. Just to keep in mind, we have Luka as a spend today. We have Jalen Brunson, Trey, Kerr, and we have some really good point guard spends. So I don't know if I'm going to get to Trey, but I think he's a good play. Like I like him. I know he's got a good projection on your end. So he's someone I will definitely be looking at when I'm picking one of my teams. He might make the list. DeJounte Murray, I don't think he makes the list at 8K. He's just not one of my favorite options. Jalen Johnson at 7.2, I don't hate. I do think it's not a bad game environment for him. And same for Bogdanovich. He's another one I don't mind. I don't hate the value that Onyeka Okongwu provides. The one thing to talk about with Okongwu that I think is a pretty good point, I think right now everyone is assuming that Richaun Holmes is just, currently going to be the guy that starts. Derek Lively is doubtful. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if Dwight Powell randomly started. I know Richaun Holmes looked great the other day. But point I'm getting at is if Richaun Holmes somehow was not the starter, which I think as a starter, people would be very interested in him, well, I think people might pivot to Okongwu. I know it's pricier than him, but I could see people making that pivot at the center position possibly. So, he's definitely a solid guy off the bench, has a pretty good fantasy point per minute producer, and he's just too cheap at that price for the fantasy point per minute production that he provides. So I also don't hate that at 4.8K, and I could see, again, people pivoting to him at center if they needed to. Maybe they would just pivot $200 down to a Dwight Powell instead, but what I'm just getting at is that Mavericks situation, we could see Holmes not start. That wouldn't surprise me. We'll talk about that more when we get there.
Yeah, I agree. A few of the takeaways too, just to add on to what you said with the Hawks right now. Another team that's kind of forced into a tight rotation. I'm a big buyer on Jalen Johnson. The price tag is interesting. It's going to keep people somewhat off of him too. I think he has to play a lot here. Bogdanovich, like DeAndre Hunter, maybe is expected back. He's still questionable, but Sadiq Bey's been playing heavy minutes, and with him out, Bogdan has to have a big role here. Just considering, like when all of these guys were healthy, the wings, I always set a rule. It was like one max out of their four main wings: Jalen Johnson, Bogdanovich, Sadiq Bey, and DeAndre Hunter. But with Hunter most likely on a minutes limit, at least that's what I am assuming. I just don't think he's relevant at 5'2" at all. And I see Bogdan as being a really nice play. So I'm an aggressive buyer on Bogdan over 2.5 points bumped up. So he's like the guy when I look at, again, the other thing that I try to do is if the field's going to be heavy on someone like Clay as a starter, and I see an edge in a guy like Bogdanovich who maybe gets overlooked because if he's not starting and DeAndre Hunter starting, people are going to overlook him. Projection systems might overlook him a little bit. But I know from a rotation standpoint, he should be, in this matchup, close to starter type minutes. At least that's the assumption. And I don't mind taking risks or stands like that as well. I always talk about this backcourt, a little bit difficult to get to when Trae Young and DeJounte are both in. But, man, Trae Young looked really good yesterday, was efficient, and he's been an assist machine, just dishing out dimes. So I am once again a buyer on Trae Young. But when we get to the Luka projection, it's just so aggressive, and I 100% agree with it. And I almost want to get – I'm close to just like lock buttoning Luka and just moving on. And so that takes a guard or point guard spot away. And then it makes all of these other plays, the Trae Youngs, Steph Curry, Jalen Brunson, even Dame Lillard, all interesting, especially for tournaments. But I am a buyer on Trae. And then if the other thing too is if DeJounte got ruled out, then I would be an extremely aggressive buyer on Trae Young as well. I mean, it just becomes such a good spot. Like if DeJounte's out, what are you doing with Trae Young?
I mean, if DeJounte's out, Trae Young's one of the better plays. The one argument you can make is if you're playing Luka, like that does boost Bogdanovich, right? And if you play Luka and Bogdanovich, you've already taken up two guard spots, right? Yeah. So now I only have one for sure. You can use two in the utility, but there are ways you can get away with it with not playing Trae Young, for sure. I think there are routes, and I think it could be playing Bogdanovich. Another thing I want to call out is if Klay Thompson had only shooting guard eligibility and Bogdanovich had shooting guard small forward, Bogdanovich would be popping more, right? Because I believe your projection on Bogdanovich is higher than Klay Thompson. So that's one thing to kind of mention that I noticed is like if Bogdanovich had that forward flexibility, that'd be huge, but he doesn't, right? So that's one of the reasons why you are seeing a Klay Thompson pop more than a Bogdanovich, specifically because of, I think, that forward eligibility. I think that's a huge factor. Can you click on Golden State just to check? Because I believe your Klay projection was, So
and that was one of the manual type of adjustments that I made when I first ran the base build. And this is why it's like, whatever, if you're, so I always average out our projections in Sabres and I run a base build, and which really is just, here's how I run it. I use these settings and I use Sim Diversity 1 versus lately what I've been using for multi-entry is Sim Diversity 5, 0 correlation. But when I run a base build, I run it like that. And then I sort by highest projected. It's just a faster way of getting kind of a cashy type of pool of lineups to sift through. So when I did that, that's where I got a ton of Klay, not as much Bogdanovich. And that's just one move that I wanted to at least consider in my pool of 5,000 builds on the slate.
Yeah, and I just think the reason I mentioned it is I think it just shows the importance of like the forward position a little bit, and how the path is pushing you there with him, right? That's the point I'm getting at. When I look on my Sabre on my side, I look at Bogdanovich. I have a lesser projection on him than Klay right now. I haven't really changed too much, but Klay is in the shooting guard spot at 20% of the time, and then in the small forward spot, I got him 75% of the time right now, right? And that's because the forward spot, it just seems a little, I don't know if it's rougher is the word, but it just seems like it's a little tougher than some of these guards, for sure. So a lot of different ways you can go. And there's a lot of good forwards in this game, right? The Kumingas, the Draymonds, the Jalen Johnsons. We talked about them all. Really, really strong plays. I don't got much else to touch on with this game. Obviously, again, like you said, if Murray happened to be out, that'd be really good for Trae Young, and we have to readjust some stuff. We'll see if we get that news while we're on the show here.
Yeah, let's go on to the next games. We got the next game. We got the Kings at the Bulls. Very unfortunate for the Bulls. Zach LaVine ruled out for the season. What was it? Right foot surgery. So very unfortunate for them. Outside of that, they got Kobe White questionable. That's obviously the big news there. Dallin Terry doubtful. Torrey Craig is questionable. He practiced, so I would assume that he is probably good to go. And on the Kings side, not really much news despite being on a back-to-back. I thought my one takeaway, I thought Malik Monk looked good. He still played not like a heavy role or anything like that, but at least he looked good. He went through a really rough stretch there for a little bit. What are you doing with the Kings and Bulls tonight?
Yeah, it is funny the fact that you mentioned Malik Monk. Monk was a guy that I kind of, I noticed he was popping a little bit, but I was just like, I feel like I had enough guards that I liked, so I kind of left him off the list for me. But it is a cheap price, right? At 4.9, the ceiling is there, right? If we're just talking ceiling performances, he does have the opportunity for sure. Kevin Huerter's been pretty good in this role as well. It's worth mentioning 5.1K. And when Monk kind of struggles, Huerter does well. And when Huerter struggles, Monk does well. It seems like there's some correlation there, and there has been for the past couple of years. Harrison Barnes is the weird one I can't really put my finger on at 5K. He's shown some pretty nice upside at times. I doubt I get there. I know forward's bad. I think I like the forwards in the other games that we talked about. I know he's played a little bit better, but he's more the last guy in. Listen, if you love everything else and you fall on Harrison Barnes, it's not the worst team in the world for sure, but not certainly going out of my way for it. I don't see myself getting the Fox and Sabonis really much today. I just think there's other studs that I'd rather spend on, and I just don't see myself getting there. I don't know. Do you want me to go to the Bulls side of the ball? Or do you want to touch on the Kings first, AP?
Yeah, let me touch on the Kings real quick. Then we will go to the Bulls. I'm with you. I'm a slight seller on Harrison Barnes, but a few takeaways. Maybe it's just the bias in me creeping in, because this has been a guy that we haven't been able to trust for a long time, and he's shown a terrible floor, but it's changed a little bit. The rotation is a lot tighter. He's actually put up some decent numbers. We're seeing a little bit slightly higher offensive usage as well. I don't know. Right now, I'm like a seller on him relative to where we're at. That's for me, it's one of those things you circle, you pivot back to, kind of in that round 3. I like to see within my pool of 5,000 builds how many lineups am I even getting with a guy like Harrison Barnes? So that's kind of how I tackle it. I am a slight seller on Kevin Huerter. So here's my issue with Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter right now. We know Kevin Huerter is getting the minutes. I don't like this matchup as much when you think of like Ayo DeSumo, Alex Caruso. Like this Bulls team should be pretty good against opposing backcourts when you just think about those two guys defensively. And so I think with Kevin Huerter, I'm just a little bit torn. The thing with Malik Monk, he's a guy who can create his own shot. He's kind of a momentum player. He got to get into rhythm. I saw that yesterday. And that's why I want to keep Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter kind of close. I want to be a buyer on Malik Monk. I want to get in early before he kind of hits another run like we've seen in the past. And then it's like these Bulls games for me, I don't want to be personally like too aggressive with because a lot of this is slate dependent too. I already know Luka is a stud I want to prioritize. When I look at the other studs on this slate, I would say Giannis is next. I think it's going to be a great matchup. And so I want to be a buyer on Sabonis. I talk about Sabonis all the time. He's someone to keep in your tournament player pool because he always has that ability to put up a triple-double. And if one of the chalkier studs go off, you're automatically going to be different. That is this case tonight again. But do I trust Sabonis versus Luka? No, not at all. Luka, I would. I mean, I'm going to take him 10 out of 10 times that he outperforms Sabonis tonight in this matchup. With the context being Kyrie out, he's going to get all the usage. We just know what Luka is capable of. What about Sabonis versus Giannis? Well, that's where you can make a case. I mean, Giannis, I obviously lean the Giannis route, but you get a slight price decrease. And I'm just talking stud versus stud, not position versus position. And so that's where the case could potentially be made in maybe a unique double stud type of lineup. So I'm not I don't love Sabonis tonight, but I want to be a slight buyer on him just to see how many builds pop into my 5,000 pool. And also I think De'Aaron Fox, in relation to the entire season, I feel like he's underpriced. Now he struggled, so it makes sense. It makes sense why he's underpriced. But again, I want to be a slight buyer relative to the field just to see in large field tournaments if we can get any Fox lineups in there that look pretty nice. So I don't love this spot for the Kings, but I am a slight buyer on Monk, Fox, Sabonis. Now, am I going with a game stack here? No, not at all. It would be more of like a one max type of situation. Like if I'm playing Fox, he's probably in there by himself, and I'm probably pulling multiple pieces from another game. Same with Monk, same with Kevin Huerter. That's kind of how I see the Kings side. Do you have any final things to add on the Kings?
Yeah, I mean, final thoughts. Like, I agree with you on the Fox thing for sure. Like, the price is too cheap. I have other guards I'm playing, right? And I'm not MMEing, but if you are MMEing, I understand why to buy on him and some of the takes that you had on that. But those were good takes on there. And I did agree with like the DeSumo and Caruso. Like, they can cause some problems there, right? Where that could kind of decrease the ceiling of some of these guys. Keep in mind we have like median projections in there, I'm sure, is kind of like the base typically. And you can make a case that those ceilings could be weighed down by some of those Bulls guys. So that's kind of my overall thoughts. Let's shift on over to the Bulls now. The Bulls are pretty interesting. We did get the news that Zach LaVine, and he hasn't been playing, but he is out for the season. So no more Zach LaVine. This is the group they're running with. And Kobe White is questionable, right? That's a pretty big piece of news because if Kobe White happened to miss, right, it would be these Bulls guys to the moon, right? You'd want Ayo, you'd want Alex Caruso. It's just these Bulls guards would absolutely smash. So I want to obviously wait on that news. That's going to be important. I think we'll have enough of that news in time. Keep in mind, this game is 30 minutes after the lock time, but that's going to be a big piece of news that we are watching for with Caruso and DeSumo. And those guys are even fine plays with Kobe White in, right? They become even better plays if that's the case. And that would be great for Vucevic and DeRozan's usage. So there's some real good opportunity here for these options. And you could also make a case that some of these guys coming off the bench could get increased roles. I think Torrey Craig is one of those guys that could see an increased role, right? He's kind of like a nice, he's like a Swiss Army knife. He does so many different things. You can plug him in at the 4, the 3. You could do it at the 2 if you want. It's not ideal, but the point I'm getting at is Torrey Craig is a value at 3-3 is not someone to ignore, especially if Kobe White is out. It's going to be a big piece of news to watch for. And if Kobe White's in, could you get away with it? Yeah, you could, but he's not a play I love. He has 3.3K and he helps make things work. That's really my Bulls breakdown. It's hard to do much without the Kobe White news, but maybe you have a way to talk this through on Saber on how to handle this.
Yeah, just one last quick note too. I mean, I agree with chat here. And again, I got multiple things up, so trying to keep an eye on chat as well. But like Sabonis, there is a good case to be made that I don't think, maybe it's just like the industry not, us included, not like realizing what this guy's doing. Like his floor has been incredible. He's shown an insane ceiling. And I agree with it. Like, I'm a buyer, but I don't know if I'm aggressive enough as a buyer in relation, like it's over a 2-point bump, but I don't know if that's enough. So again, once I run my builds, one thing I'll do within my pool of 5,000, if I'm not getting a lot of Sabonis, I mean, there's many reasons why that could be happening. Like, one, maybe he's just a bad play. Maybe there's other players in that position that are a lot better. Luka, that's one of them. Giannis would be the other one as well. But is that the case right now? Like, the Bucks, they're all healthy. Like, Middleton, they haven't been playing well at all. And this is going to be a tough game tonight. They probably need to go in and get a win. They don't have a new win with their new coach, right? He's coached what, 2 games? 2 or 3 games? I know they lost their last 2. And this is, it's not really important. We'll get to it, but
yeah,
does I don't think Doc Rivers has a win yet.
Doc does not have it, because I remember he lost 2. I don't think he has a win yet.
Yeah. So going over to the Bulls side, though, I do want to be a buyer on DeRozan. I think this could be maybe a sneaky game. I didn't do much here yet, Mangone, except for I was a slight buyer on the 2 guards. And I do that for a reason. If Kobe White is out, I think it's like DeSumo's probably a lock. You just lock him in, you move on. But then I want to see what the starting lineup is. And then you're considering guys like, Javon Carter potentially. So I want to be prepared to make those adjustments. Like, this is where it's unique, and this is where late swap, which is this button up here. We get that question all the time. Late swap can be huge, and this is why this is important. I love this early game, but you got to just keep a mental note of what positions to kind of keep a little bit flexible as well. So this is obviously if Kobe White is out, that's going to change the slate. Because now it's like more usage to DeRozan, Vucevic, the backcourt, and you're still going to get a really tight rotation. So keep an eye on that. But right now, outside of bumping up these guys, I'm kind of leaving it be for now.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think you're also sometimes you kind of bump up those guys that could end up getting really big boosts to ensure that they're in the optimizer on your team. So I do think it's not a bad idea to do that. So. But we're 2 games in. We can go to the next. We got 5 to talk about. If you guys could hit that like, that would be appreciated as always. Where do you want to go next with Cleveland and San Antonio?
Yeah, let's do. Some of these are going to be fairly quick. Like, I think this is going to be a quick one. I'm kind of a seller here, but we got Cleveland and the Spurs. Spurs on a back-to-back, right? So that's always going to be. I'm basically Mike Mangone. I'm basically a seller on the entire Spurs team. Like, pop on a back-to-back, the situation I just do not trust. On the Cleveland side, Jared Allen practiced and he made shoot around. I expect he's going to play. Evan Mobley still likely on a minutes limit. So the Cavs are now healthy. What's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I tend to agree on the Spurs. I will say Trey Jones at 5'5", the ceiling is really good. So not going to ignore Trey Jones. Devin Vassell, too, at 6'6". I like his ceiling as well. But to be fair, back-to-back, minutes could be allocated in a really weird way with someone like Popovich. Let's see if Wemby, I'm curious if he has played back-to-backs recently. Okay, so one thing to call out, and this is something I would take note of. Recently, and I can't remember when it was. It feels like it was a couple weeks ago, though. Popovich basically said Wemby is playing 30 minutes a night pretty much every night. And, that Portland, Minnesota game, which was on January 26th, January 27th, back-to-back, in Minnesota, he played 30 minutes, Wemby. I'm still okay to buy on Wemby. I'm not as nervous about the Popovich thing seeing that. That was something I wanted to think about a little bit. You could say, someone in the chat, minute concerns combined with blowout likelihood. I mean, they kept it close with the Pelicans yesterday. They could easily keep it close. One thing for me personally is I just know what Wemby's ceiling is. I don't want to miss out on that ceiling. He's been incredible lately. At 9.4, I'm interested in him a little bit, especially.
All right, you sold me.
Yeah,
we'll retract these back to where they were. And
yeah,
I ended up a slide buyer, but we'll see.
And I think I'd be cautious with like Zach Collins, Keldon, because like those guys are coming off an injury. But Trey Jones at 5.5 is roll's good. If they get blown out, yes, you're right. Like Trey Jones won't get that fourth quarter run, but that's any team, right? If they get blown out, that's something definitely to think about, put in the equation if you want. But I just think the ceilings for their prices in Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, and then Wemby, we just know what he can do. It's just insane. I wouldn't completely ignore him. So yeah, that's kind of my take on
what about the Cavs side? So like for me, Mangone, like Donovan Mitchell. So I know Darius Garland's still likely on a minutes limit. The price is not adjusted at all. For me, it's really simple. I'm a buyer on Donovan Mitchell and a slight buyer on Karis LeVert. I just think in this matchup, fast pace up and down against the Spurs backups, I think there's like an outside chance that maybe in certain, situations where a Karis LeVert could get there, and this is more larger field type of stuff, where you're able to take on a little bit more risk.
Yeah, and Allen, he participated in shoot around, so we're assuming he plays, but you never know. I think if Allen's out, that's going to boost these guys too. Keep in mind, he's just been doing a lot, and I know that they are healthier, but I agree. Like, it's not a bad idea to buy on Mitchell for a low percentage. It also doesn't take much, right, to buy on that low percentage. Keep in mind, though, if you're playing Donovan Mitchell, and like let's say you get like 30% Donovan Mitchell, well, that might be why you don't have a lot of Curry and some of these other players, and that's where you have to consider making an adjustment if you're not getting enough exposure to certain players. So that's kind of how I handle it. I don't hate the idea of just saying, hey, it's the San Antonio Spurs. Guards can crush them. Understand going LeVert and understand going Mitchell. It's not crazy because they can have ceiling games that they just absolutely nuke. So I understand your thought process there.
Yeah, it's the other thing too is I mean, obviously context matters. And Wemby, I guess you bring up some really good points. 9,400. What was he yesterday? Had to be right around the same price, right?
Yeah,
92, 93.
He's similar to that, but honestly, the thing I like the most about Wemby is he is flipping the build today, right? Like, he is the definition of going up and flipping the build. Now, you can play a spend-up guard with Wemby. You can do that. There's enough value to, but not everyone's doing that right now. They're stopping at certain marks. They're stopping at DeMar DeRozan. That's one of the guys they're stopping at. Let's say Kobe White's in. Of course, I think DeMar DeRozan is a good play with or without Kobe White, but that does not make him as good of a play as he could have been at that 7.5K tag. So I just think Wemby completely flips the bill. That's the reason I kind of like him a little bit as a contrarian spend-up option.
Yeah, and let me do this. So we got the heat map here, and this is kind of how I like to use it visually. And I know like got a lot of questions like, well, how do you even use this? Well, we're showing you right now. We got Saber, we got this. We're talking through the slate. Again, this is like all stuff that I do. And what Mangone's talking about is it does, because Kuminga, Draymond, even Okongwu, I think they got it, like, especially Kuminga, he's going to get a lot of ownership. Rashawn Holmes, currently, assuming he starts and sees a similar rotation to what he saw, going to get a lot of ownership. And then I thought Hartenstein back to those minutes. I think he's underpriced. I think he's going to, and then Giannis too. All of these people right here, or all these players, are taking ownership away from a Wemby, just because you can't play everyone. And so that's what Mangone's talking about when it comes to flipping the build. And I like that. I think that's a really good note. I think that's really interesting on this slate. So I just wanted to highlight that. Any other final thought? Or go ahead.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I currently don't have a lot of Wemby on my single entry kind of stuff, but that is going to hammer in a lot of those certain plays. What I might do is make an adjustment to Wemby's projection and go and see if I get more. And if I don't get any, well, there's a reason why, based on Sabersim, right? And Sabersim is calculating the simulations for my single entry contest. I would assume in MME formats, if I bump him and the ownership is low, then there's more of a likelihood that he gets pushed in there. So that's something else to know. I know I talked him up, and I don't want someone to look at my line and be like, why didn't he play him? Well, I'm looking at single entry tonight. That's my key thing. And then I'm shifting over to NASCAR and MMEing that with all the overlay that I'm hoping for. And I just think Wemby is someone to just not ignore. And I didn't even know that I was going to play him or consider playing him until we kind of had this conversation, because I wanted to see the back-to-back stuff. Because I understand everyone is scared to touch the Spurs. But I just know Popovich has been a little bit better, and it can happen at any time. But you always have to think about the ownership. Now, if Wemby was going to be like 50% tonight, would I be interested in that? No, I wouldn't. But it seems like he's going to be very low, and I think you have to consider it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And Jake Swales, good to see you back in here. He would play Trey over Wemby at that price. And now again, like going back to the heat map, there's and this is the other reason why I use it. I'm a visual guy. I like to see, if we're talking chess, I like to see the board in its, entirely. And you have a lot of value at the power forward center position. And so, yeah, playing a Trey Young over him in that same price range, you could definitely make that case, because you have the potential value in that power forward center position to make that happen. Unless, of course, Rashawn Holmes doesn't start. Go ahead.
But AP, this is an important thing to mention that I think matters a ton when you look at teams. And I noticed it last night with my single entry team. I had a pretty good team for the most part last night. My team was solid. I had Trey Jones at 6%, drop 40. I had Wemby, Isaiah Jackson. I had Kuminga, Şengün. I had a lot of the good plays. I did, unfortunately, have Trey Murphy and Anthony Edwards. And I was wondering why my teams weren't as good. Well, one of the problems I had was if I just changed Trey Murphy to like Mathurin, someone like Mathurin was just so good, right? When a value,
I locked Mathurin. He was so good. I wish I would have spoke heavier on that on the show, but obviously we didn't know the situation at that point in time too.
Yeah, and it was slightly an oversight, I think, on my part. But the reason I'm like kind of talking about this is the way Wemby gets there is if, let's say, Luka's good and Trey, they're all good. Like Trey gets you 48. Like you're happy with 48.50 from Trey, right? Or even 52. You're happy with it. But if we get cheap guards, like let's say Kobe White is ruled out and you have Caruso and DeSumo are popping up a lot and you just have really good guards do well, you might need the raw points at the forward position, especially if some other players bust that forward. So that's something to kind of think about. That is why I mention it. Wemby's raw points could matter when you flip the build and get unique. So it's just something to kind of consider when constructing your teams, especially if guard value does open up. Because right now, everyone is spending up for a lot of guards. They're mixing in some guard values, but currently they're going cheaper at center and they're spending up at guard and they're in that mid-tier range and some value forwards. That's basically the build, and that's going to make Wemby go unowned.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. I do think there's a lot of risk in the situation. I think, like, let's get to this next game because, I mean, look, like Luka's projection is just outrageous and rightfully so. Like I'm to the point to where it's like I'm a buyer on him, even at this projection, which is a ridiculously insane projection. I just honestly am probably going to lock him tonight. That's how I'm going to handle it. I know he's the best play, best spend up, for the ultra contrarians out there, running your contest sims, wanting to get different. Yeah, you could make the case to fade him, but I tend to take the other side of that and just lock these plays and move on. And
you can find other spots to get unique, AP. It's okay, right? I'm probably going to do the same thing. I'm going to play Luka and say, when I'm looking at my teams, I'm going to look at Sabersim and say, where is it getting me unique? Where should I get unique in different spots? I think that's something to think about with your build. So I'm with you. I love Luka. I'm going to overproject him as well.
So the other thing too, and keep going with this, I think the Mavs side is interesting because for me, it's like Luka, like these stacks where you overstack the Mavericks. It's just, there's a lot of risk to it because Luka does so much. And so I am a buyer on Luka, but I'm actually a seller across the board on almost everyone else here, and like a slight seller. It's like I don't want a lot of overstacked Mavs teams. I want Luka, and then I want Luka maybe with with one, like Rashawn Holmes, obviously, if he starts. Or
I agree. Here's a great feature we can showcase on Sabersim for people if they want. Go to Team Stacks, I think is the way to do it. Yeah, Team Stacks. And click on 4 stacks.
Yeah.
Okay. If you didn't want 4 Mavs on a team, 4 Mavs specifically, which you currently don't have, you would just click the X on it or off the check mark, right, on Dallas if you didn't want to have those. Like the other day, I kept looking at teams and I was just getting too many Spurs. Like I had like some 3 Spurs teams and I just didn't love them. So I just X'd that. That's all I X'd when I was trying to like sift through.
You want to see what? You want to see the better way to do it?
All right, what's the better way?
Because actually in Saber, you can 6-man stack a team. And I did not know that since there isn't a category here. And I had a build that ran. There were 6 players from one team. And it was one of those situations where they had like 7 or 8 active players. So we're getting a really tight rotation anyway. But I never want to, in a large field tournament, have a 6-man stack unless it's like a 2-gamer, you know? So if you go over here to settings, you go down here to lineup rules, no more than 3. So you can, all teams right there. That's kind of how I do it. Let's just say you did no more than 4. Then you could go in here and then I individually will like uncheck teams. So that's another way to basically do it.
I don't mind using that rule. I like to run it raw. And then like, there's some slates I do think, hey, I'll put that type of rule in. But the weird way I do is I just go to the stack exposure and eliminate all the 4-mans. But that's a good rule that I should probably use. But sometimes I like to see, like, for instance, the 3-mans. The reason why I put the Spurs out specifically was I was okay with 3-mans of other teams, just not 3-man Spurs. So that was some of the reasoning. So, but I like that. And I probably should use that a little bit more. I've been doing it a different way that's a little more tedious. So that's helpful information. But I'm with you on the Mavs stuff. I want to know the starters. I think Rashawn Holmes starts, but listen, if he doesn't, that's going to be pretty bad for him. And you can make a case he could get into some foul trouble, and they could use some other big men and do some wonky things. So I thought Rashawn Holmes was a lock the other night. I don't think he's a lock today. I think he's a really good player. I know Glock tweeted out the other day, Rashawn Holmes is either the best fantasy player in the world or the worst. Listen, when he wasn't going to be owned, I loved him. With a lot of ownership, I don't know. I'm just going to think on it a little bit. The Bucks side of the ball, I'm not getting a lot of Giannis for the reasons we said, and I'll probably just get the Wemby over Giannis instead. That's kind of where I'm at. Chris Middleton is another one of those 6K just like forwards that's just getting pounded into the optimizer, and for good reason. He's pretty safe, going to play a lot of minutes. I really don't mind Chris Middleton. Damian Lillard will be unowned. I just don't think anyone's playing him because there's so many other guards that you can play, and I kind of agree with that. I'd rather just play those other guards. If Damian Lillard beats me, he beats me. And I'm mainly looking at Chris Middleton. I don't think I have anything else I love on this game. How about you?
So here's where I plan on getting a little different tonight. When you look at kind of the slate in its entirety, we know the Warriors, Hawks going to get some ownership, rightfully so, really good spots. We know the Bulls, they're going to get ownership. We know the Knicks, Lakers, especially the Knicks side, going to get ownership. And then when you look at the different studs on this slate as well, like Giannis, when people go to Giannis and they click on his name, it hasn't looked good. Same with Dame and this team entirely. But they've had a few tough matchups already on this road trip. You know, playing in Denver is always tough, and then an emotional return up in Portland for Dame. Funky things happen. Now we get the Mavericks. I just think this could be one of those spots where Luka smashes, and then he's bringing not his own guys along with him, but maybe a Dame, maybe a Giannis, maybe a Middleton, or maybe multiple pieces for a mini game stack targeting the studs here. So the total here is massive, and I just like Giannis is not going to continue to put up like these 48, 55, 56, 52. Like he's just not. And I love targeting this matchup. They're favored too, which is kind of insane. Because I like the Mavericks here with the Bucks, kind of struggling right now. Luka's just an absolute machine. But if this game stays close the whole way, I think we're going to see a big number from Giannis or Dame or Middleton. And so I would cap it between those 3, like 2 max. I mean, it's probably very difficult to play Dame and Giannis together, but there are paths. You can't do it with Luka, but there are definitely paths where you can play Luka Giannis, Luka Dame, or Luka Middleton. And that's how I'm going to be targeting this game. So mini game stack. I like the studs here. And if Giannis is going to be like, what's your ownership projection on Giannis?
What's Saber? I'm sure it's like nothing, right? What does Saber have on your end? I'm curious. I'm sure it's. I'm pulling it up now. I see. It's because he's not in my builds. It's annoying to find. I
19
see
under 20%.
Yeah, I see 19. I still like depending on the contest, like MME stuff. I think you could see him there. Keep in mind it's a 5-game slate. That kind of happens, but like single entry stuff, I could see him come in at like 10%. I don't think people are gonna go to him at all. So.
Like I'm showing like no ownership on Dame too, like sub 5%. It's Dame. Like I know he's struggling, but he's under 9K now. The matchup is elite. Like the matchup is going to be extremely good for him here against the Mavericks.
Well, he just gets squeezed because there's Luka, there's Trae Young, there's Curry, there's Brunson. I mean, and you look at Mitchell, especially if Allen's out, you'd probably take Mitchell over Lillard. I know it's not the same price, but I just think he's going to get squeezed completely. And there's those cheap guards in the 5K range that we discussed. And also a lot of people with their forwards, they're spending salary with their forwards. And when you spend salary at one position, that forces you to not have money to spend in other areas. So Lillard's just not going to be owned at all.
Yeah. Another way to tackle this too is let's just say I did lock Luka, which is probably what I'm going to do tonight. I'm a seller on the rest of his team, a slight seller. Now, it doesn't mean I'm fading them. It just means that relative to kind of baseline projections, just slightly under. Then I could get I have my rules in place. I could get really aggressive, maybe set up some group rules like no Dame and Giannis together, but where it's forcing some of these players in. So that I always have a run back. And again, I'm not like big on run backs with NBA or anything like that. But on this slate, I do think it's interesting, especially with how I think this game is going to play out. But so I'm a big fan of this game, obviously, but let's keep this going. Any other final thoughts, or should we go to the Lakers and Knicks?
No, we get shipped over to that game, and you can pull it up on your end, and I can start breaking it down, and then you can talk about what you're buying and selling, and then we can run it. Jalen Brunson at 9.6. I noticed he was not popping as much as I thought he might, especially going into the slate. I think it's because projections like Curry and Trae Young a little bit more in that range. I still like Brunson. He's still someone I want to get exposure to. DiVincenzo is 7K. It feels pricey for DiVincenzo, but I still think you can play him. The big debate is like, is it him? Do you like Draymond, Kuminga? I mean, there's a lot of forwards in that range that I discussed. And another thing, I think you're going to see Dante DiVincenzo probably I assume he'd maybe slide into the forward position a bunch. Let me see on my end with Saber on my single entry stuff. Yeah, I was getting him more at the forward position, which just shows when a guy slides into that spot a little bit more, kind of shows that position's a little bit weaker. So, I think DiVincenzo, you're going to plug and play him there. Then when it comes to Anunoby, questionable for this game. We'll see if he plays. If he doesn't play, that's going to make things interesting. Josh Hart, you could make a case for him. Grimes is out. It could give a nice boost to McBride. I know I played him the other day. He was low owned, played 29 minutes. I think McBride at 3-4 could be an interesting guard that helps give you the Giannis builds, the Wemby type of builds that we discussed. Now, also, keep in mind, McBride probably has to do a lot at his tag because there's a lot of good guards. So that's another thing to mention when thinking this through. I think McBride's fine, but he might not pop just because of how good these other guards are that we'll get to him. Obviously, we've talked about, but we need the news to come through to really know how good these guards are going to be. LeBron, I mean, he was at shoot around. I'm assuming he's going to play. I assume Anthony Davis plays. But if Anthony Davis doesn't play, obviously it would be a great spot for someone like LeBron that you'd want to consider as a spend forward to get onto your teams. And then it would help some of these other big men like a Jackson Hayes or a Christian Wood. But overall, Lakers, they're tougher to get to. Some of the prices are increased for LeBron and AD being out recently. And we don't have all that news. And I don't know if I want to sit around and wait for it. Yeah, we'll probably get most of it in time. But I'm not prioritizing backloading or something crazy like that.
Yeah, I guess the assumption I'm working under is AD and LeBron play, in the Garden. Yep. And again, it's like so tough to make these assumptions in today's NBA DFS. But there's 3 games in this window. We obviously should have plenty of swap options to get to. for late swap. But I mean, right now, I don't think they're going to factor into much. I'm a slight buyer on both, but I don't think with the other options kind of in this range that they're really going to factor into too many builds. Same with the backcourt here too. Reeves a little bit more intriguing, but like I can't play D'Lo in this spot against the Knicks, slower paced team. And then the secondary pieces down here as well. So the Lakers are a team that I'm probably under or off of across the board if Anthony Davis and LeBron play. Again, if one of them sits, the other stud there becomes really interesting. And again, if it happens after lock, that's where the value's at, because a lot of people are, more people now are getting sharper, but it creates swap opportunities. And if we had the news prior to every single game locking, kind of the assumption is maybe you're getting a discount from an ownership standpoint. Maybe that player, if LeBron is out, maybe it's, AD. If we have that information right now, people would be thinking about considering AD a little bit more versus post-lock. When that happens, I think a smaller part of the pool are thinking about those type of opportunities. So as it stands right now, go ahead.
People will be locked into the Warriors forwards, right? Like they'll be on Curry and Trae Young. Those salaries will all be messed. Like the salaries that they've spent money on, they won't be able to go up and get someone like LeBron James. So it's another thing to know.
Yeah, and then we talked about, so Brunson's kind of in that, like he's priced way up now, and coming off a few games where it's been the Dante show, Josh Hart, Precious has had, a monster role with an OG out, Hartenstein 35, slightly over 35 minutes last game, and then Miles McBride. This is the I'm going to end up a buyer on him most likely, especially if OG's out. He was the main guy off the bench. We know Thibs loves to run a tight rotation. I mean, it was like I posted it in chat. It was like a 6-man rotation last game. Like that's the absolute stones for DFS. The other thing to consider too is the Lakers. Everyone except for LeBron and AD. I mean, these guys played lights out. They were obviously kind of it seemed like they were playing for their lives. Like all of them collectively as a group stole a win up in Boston. I thought that was really, really impressive. But man, this is a tricky spot coming into the Garden, playing the Knicks, shorthanded Knicks team. I think this is going to be a battle. Like I could see the Knicks. So Knicks favored by 3.5. Yeah. So I agree with that. I think the Knicks potentially get a win here. And honestly, that spread, I mean, do you think LeBron and AD both play, or do you think one of them sits just based off the spread alone?
I mean, that spread tells me that what's his name is playing OG a little bit. I mean,
yeah,
at least that's what I would think. I mean, the Knicks have been, I'm pretty sure they've won. I wanted to double check. They've won 9 in a row. So they've been rolling. So I think it's a little bit of respect to what they've been doing as well. I think it'd be hard to make them a dog in this spot, especially with how bad the Lakers have just played in general and with the questionable tag. So I think the line is fine. I don't think it's telling us that AD is sitting, just because the Knicks have been playing some really good basketball since that OG trade for sure. And even with OG out, they've been playing really well.
So yeah, the only thing that I would potentially do here is I still like Brunson. I still like targeting this Lakers backcourt. I think that's the best way to do it. If OG's in, I think I'm going to bring back, dial back the projections just a little bit on DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. And I'm not gonna like bump up OG or anything like that. He's fully priced. Even if like we knew he was going to play 40 minutes here, I don't think he's like a guy that you really build around at this price.
I would consider dialing back McBride and Precious too a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but you could just make a case that would eat into them too. But yeah, I don't disagree with, maybe they don't lean on OG a ton. Maybe they think about it a little bit.
So all right. So I ran these builds earlier, and again, it's slightly different. I didn't want to run the obviously the same. It's kind of where I'm at. Let me sort by exposure. Let me bring this tab over just so it's a little bit easier to see. And let me show you the settings. So I do this in a few ways. I don't use with NBA. I like to add a lot of bias in. Basically, I like to play very aggressive. I like to take some stands. I don't max. I play typically anywhere from 35 to like 70 builds. And for me, that allows me from a bankroll management standpoint, if I run a really bad script and I get scooped that night, it doesn't really impact me. I don't feel like even like a week straight, like it doesn't change. Like I don't get tilted by that, if that makes sense. So for me, that number, that's how I get to this kind of, strange number. It allows me to take stands and I try not to like manipulate the numbers too much. I like the numbers. I want the numbers to be true. I want them to represent where the best place should be. And then I'm typically sorting. So I did run the contest sims, and we'll show that. But I'm typically sorting by highest projected since I'm adding that bias into it. And then what I do is, so look, like I didn't lock Kuminga in here, but you can see I'm getting 100% or lock Luka. I'm getting 100% Luka, basically 100% Kuminga. And to get these Luka lineups, especially Luka plus another stud, it's obviously forcing in a value, and that value or multiple values. And that's McBride and Rashawn Holmes. And I think a lot of that makes sense right now with how the slate sets up. So, Mangone, before I kick it to you, now, if I want to start to diversify out a little bit. So, like one, my interpretation of the contest sim sorting by risk adjusted, which I'm going to show everyone, it does naturally diversify you a little bit more. So you get a broader portfolio as exposures go. And I'm fine with that. I like that. My personal rules, I want to be overweight, like severely overweight on at least 3 players. That's kind of one of my baseline rules for the strategy with how I play. So, and I don't go in with a mindset of what that player is going to be. I let kind of the slate pan itself out, and then I make those decisions at this point in time. But sorting by highest projected, not using contest sims, then I'll just start to introduce, uniques. I think like 3 uniques on tonight's slate. And what you'll see is I'm still getting a ton of Luka. And honestly, that's where I'm like, well, I'm probably just going to lock in Luka. I'm still very overweight on 3 players. So 3 boxes checked right there. And then I have a broader range of exposures down here. So you can do that, or you can go ahead.
Yeah, so you and I do it different. I wanted to just get I figured let me provide a different take to people. And real quick, guys, hit that like. We got 586 watching, and we got 87 likes. So hit that like for us, please. We would appreciate it over here at Run Pure Sports. And we also, great time to sign up. We got all of the sports going on, so you want to check all that out. But
you're a better host than me, Mangone. So I'm appreciative that you hit all those marks.
Yeah, we gotta let the people know. I mean, there's tons of sports going on. But pull up the exposures again. Yeah, there it is, where I can see the exposure. Perfect.
Yep.
So what I would do is, so I'm with you. I'm okay. I think a lot about when I see my highest exposed guys. I think about, why am I getting a lot of exposure to them? Is it too much? Does it make sense? For me, I would be fine with my Luka stuff. I would probably go and look at my point guards specifically, like Curry and the other guys, because they're part of those spends. And if, let's say I have only 2% Curry, well, the reason why is someone's using it all on Luka. So I go and I do things like that. The next thing I would think about is someone like Miles McBride. I wouldn't be comfortable with 77%. I like to look at the ownership where it's at 27%. And for me, I might cap the ownership, right? Like I might put a cap. And I know not everyone does that. I've seen success when I do it, but I do
that too. Yep.
Yeah. I look at Miles McBride as a more volatile player. Now, if it was Miles McBride was the starting point guard and Jalen Brunson was out, yeah, I would probably jam in McBride even more. But I like to think about that. Like Rashawn Holmes, for instance. Rashawn Holmes is someone we're getting at 86.
So give me an example of a max exposure number that you would put it. And I'm going to plug that in, and I'm going to show everyone how it basically updates.
Okay, yeah. So for me, I saw he was 28%. I'd maybe put it at 40 or now I'm well overweight. Now here's the counter, AP. When you do the change, let's see what happens with the rest of our exposures. Because listen, I might make it 40 or 45%, and now I might be getting some really weird constructions. But you know what? We're not. What we're getting is some more balanced constructions. You see Ayo DeSumo has popped up. You see Draymond Green, that's popped up. Bogdanovich is another guy who shot up a little bit. Now, sometimes I make those adjustments, AP, and I go, I made this adjustment and I'm getting like Dwight Powell like at 60%. I don't like that. Sometimes the alternatives aren't good plays that you really want to play. And sometimes there are really good plays that are just under-owned that you might want to get exposure to. It's just something to really think about. And we did just get slate changing news. Brook Lopez is out. That should likely help out the ownership of Bobby Portis. One thing to call out, AP, while you're kind of making some adjustments on your end if you want, but I noticed the other day, Bobby Portis's minutes under Doc Rivers, they have been a lot higher, I'm pretty sure. I want to double check, though. I'm pulling up Popcorn now just to kind of mention it. But he played 22 minutes in the Portland game, not as much. I think it was the other game he played a lot. He played 25 minutes, so not as much as I was thinking, but I think Bobby Portis is one of those direct bumps. I mean,
here's the other thing too, and this is what it was the last Saturday slate when Joel Embiid got ruled out 3 minutes before the game started. So this is a good example that we can use kind of live. Let's just say the slate was going on and you had under 5 minutes to act. What are you doing? Are you waiting for projections to update? Are you just like Xing them out and then doing it in your head?
Yeah, I'm instantly Xing them out. My initial read, right, if I have not a lot of time to figure this out and pull it off, my initial read is we're bumping Bobby Portis, right? We're going to give him a bump. There's a ton of forwards that are in the mid tier that'll get allocated some of his minutes. I'm bumping him. I'm probably going to bump Giannis a bit too, because honestly, I'm already not getting a lot of Giannis, and if I bump him, I'm still probably not going to get that much. I want to bump Middleton up a little bit too. Dame, I probably wouldn't bump as much. You could bump him. I don't mind you doing that, but the reason why I wouldn't bump Dame as much is I would probably just understand that I'm not getting a lot anyways already because of all those other guards, and it's just not going to do anything. And then I would think on how am I bumping the cheap guys, right? Between the Beasleys, the Crowders, and Connaughtons, which one of them could maybe get a slight boost? It would be Connaughton with a slight bump, maybe just because of his eligibility with that forward eligibility could be more valuable than Beasley at the shooting guard. But that's really it. And honestly, I don't think those guys are going to pop that much at their prices based on some of the values we already have on this slate. It's really going to bump in more Bobby Portis, more Middleton, and maybe some Giannis.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to show people that in those type of scenarios, and it's what I did last Saturday, and this is what I think people should do. X them out yourself. Just trust your read on it and fire. It's going to be at least better than like waiting around and then not, running the risk of not getting the change in. And again, what we're talking about is if the slate already started and it was a late slop opportunity where you had less than 5 minutes to act, and you could see right there, I X'd them out, and then I started bumping up kind of the key guys. Giannis. Go ahead. And
if you run it and let's say you make a bad adjustment on something like AP. One time I change projections. I don't use the sign on the side like you do, where you just like bump it up. I type the number in. And I
usually type the number in too. Just to be quick, I was,
Well, one time in a time crunch, I forget what sport or what it was, but my number wasn't like 36. It was 336. So I ended up getting 100%. And then so I had no time. So what was my quick fix? I just set a max. I said, I messed up. I can't rerun this, right? I tried to change the projection, still was popping him in so much because he's in all of the sims because of my bad adjustment. I just set a max, and it kind of helped fix it as best as possible. Again, trying to find those quick fixes while the field is waiting for projections, I think that's a great way to go about it.
The other thing, too, that I want to just hit on really quickly is this first part right here. So you see I have a few tabs obviously created, but we're still like, I view this first part anytime we get like significant news change and we're not in the late swap type of environment. When we get a significant change like that, I want to start back over and kind of rebuild my pool of 5,000 because the first field of 5,000 builds that I was working under, it wasn't factoring in that situation. So like I could go back to that and like, I'm just curious how much like Bobby Portis and stuff that I was getting. And I will go and look at this. And that's why you gotta understand and realize kind of where you're at. And I love this feature in Saber because you can just track your different your different builds, right here. And I know they have some other changes coming up too that's going to make it even better. But if I pull up the I mean, yeah, I'm barely getting any, like in my pool alone, only 12, 3 Giannis, Middleton, 16%. That's going to change now. That is like, I was getting no Bobby, like 0.28 lineups had Bobby Portis. So like, and again, we're not sitting here trying to say that like Bobby Portis is going to be optimal or anything like that, but it's make sure that when you're doing this, a significant piece of news, when that hits, you really get in your before locks, you're not in a post lock, late swap type of environment, you really got to consider recreating that pool of 5,000. Is that something that you do as well?
Yeah, 1,000%. I'm always recreating it. I go in, I import the CSV, I do the late swap, and I want to rerun everything the correct way. So yeah, I think those are really good points. And I know that won you a lot of money the other day. I wish every night it was a chaotic scenario. I feel like that's going to benefit the people that are very close to their computer and very close at trying to make those decisions and making them quick. So I'm definitely with you on that.
So just quick hitting on Rubio's very, very high on contest. Are you leaning on contest sims typically too? Or I guess I view it as having a little bit more control over my lineups by sorting by highest projected, but what's your stance on
that? I sort by contest sims. I do ROI. I'll admit, like I look at it more at single entry stuff. I don't look as deep when it comes to the MME stuff at this, but I'll look at the projected scores and I'll scroll through. I normally, when I do single entry stuff, I run 20 teams. I look through them, and I don't know, one of my top teams, if it's like a 6-point drop from another team that I like that's maybe 4 teams down, well, I'll try to figure out what's the reason for it. And is it just going a really contrarian play? Try to kind of figure that out. So I do look at the projected scores, but I like to use the ROI because I feel like it helps funnel in some of those really cheap plays, or not cheap plays, some of those really good lower owned plays throughout my lineups. And another thing I'll do sometimes with it is I'll click the hourglass. Like if I'm just hand picking a team in MME, I'll just click the hourglass on like 3 guys I really want to play. That way I can just look at those teams that only have those 3 guys. And if you really wanted to, you could just lock those guys and then move on. Sometimes I do that. I know Rubio started doing that, and I started doing that a little bit more, but those are kind of some of the ways I use it as a single entry and 3 max guy. When I do MME though, I just kind of, make my adjustments. I run it, I trust it, and use the settings that I use and hit export and call it a day.
So I'm bringing this last thing up. This is yesterday's slate. Just to show people kind of, because I walked through my process. I said from a high level, like what my goal is and why I play how I play. And I like to take some big stands. And so I just want to highlight that from yesterday's slate. I'll show you guys where I was at. And this is kind of interesting too. So this is the contest flashback, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And you could, so this is what I was getting at. When we got that news, Mangone, like I ended up locking Isaiah Jackson, TJ McConnell, and Benny Mathurin. So almost locked, but that's what I did. And obviously I took a huge stand on, I always have these like crazy, like my YOLO type of play. And that was Tyler Hero and Stephen Curry. Despite both underwhelming, and obviously I was really high on Sabonis too, I still made money on the slate. So, couldn't really complain there, but just kind of wanted to show that I think this is an underrated feature too. You can see how others are playing. We could pull up our guy, Bryce. You see that winning build from yesterday too. While he was at the game, I mean, that thing was tasty. Let me pull it up. Mr. Third and Schlong. Congratulations, sir. Nice little 100K. Do you go back and review your stuff too often or use this feature very much?
I do. Sometimes it's a detriment, but
I know. Never go back and look, right?
Yeah, I saw petty theft in the chat earlier, and I was mentioning how in NFL, if I just did all I wanted to do last NFL weekend, and I just kind of forgot, is I just wanted to go find the best CMC and Lamar Jackson team, AP, and then just let the optimizer build the team and tell the rest of you guys to catch me. And that team would have won 20K in like the 3 max if I would have just played that one with just raw projections, right? Not really messing with anything and making adjustments. So that is what it is. But
Corey Kispert, man, what a play!
Corey
What a
Kispert,
nut play!
The Corey Kispert play was great, man. It was awesome.
He's been. I watch. And again, it's painful to watch. I'm usually like on the Peloton when I'm watching this terrible Wizards team play, but we talked about it yesterday. Like Corey Kispert has been playing better. He's been playing better. He's been a spark off the bench. So, I definitely didn't mind that play. I didn't want to lock in any early values like that early on, though, just because I was unsure what the Pacers were going to do. But anyways, let's get to our plays of the day. I'll X this screen out. You want to go first? I don't even know where our likes are at. Do we do play of the days? Do we not do play of the days?
The likes were hurtful before. I hope they've gotten better. We're at 115 with 446 watching. We had 583 at one point. So, I mean, I'm down to put them in the Discord if you are. I'm just saying.
Let's do Discord because we've been going back and forth too much. I don't have a play of the day. And then I always feel obligated to like smash the Tyler Hero. That was my that was my stand yesterday. And so
that happened the other day where someone said to me, I like Jabari Smith. Remember I talked about that mid-tier, the 5 range and the 6K had so many upside plays or whatever. And I didn't play him on my team. And someone was, hitting me up on Twitter saying my play sucked. And I said, yeah, I didn't play him. And, I still thought he was a good play. But the reason I didn't play him was the slate changed. I mean, it changed when Rashawn Holmes became a starter at 3K. And it just changed the whole construction of the slate, which happens at times. But we'll put the plays of the day in the chat. You got no one to blame but yourselves. You got to hit that like for us in order to get those plays of the day. And no, Drew, I'm not going to give a fake play out, but we'll give them out in the Discord for sure. Let me get off the show. Let me run some stuff. AP will do the same. We'll post it in there.
Sir.
We got NASCAR lock too coming up in an hour and 15 minutes. I'll say this. I said there may be a show. I don't know if there's a show. From some of the messages behind the scenes, there might be a show. So that's where we're at. It is a questionable tag on the NASCAR show.
Love it.
Be on the lookout on the Twitter account. It'll be tweeted out if there is anything. But that is for us, AP. How about you close it out for us?
Yeah, let's get out of here. Going to be a fun slate tonight. Hit the like button. We appreciate it. If you want more content like this, let us know. Hit me up. Shoot me a DM. We are happy to do so. So for Mangone, I'm AP. Let's get out of here.